In a moment, you'll hear a short clip of a video game song. Your job is to identify if the track is from the Kingdom Hearts series, the Final Fantasy series, or, to keep you on your toes, none of the above. You will get 1 point for guessing the correct series, and a bonus point for identifying the specific game. There's one more trick behind this quiz that I won't tell you yet, and it's your job to figure it out. Once the first round of 20 questions is over, I will explain the trick behind the video and give you a musical analysis of why it works. You'll then get a chance to use that knowledge in the second round, which will have an extra twist. Good luck. From that first round, some of you should have been able to figure out the secret behind this video. Here's the trick. This was never about Kingdom Hearts or Final Fantasy. This is about Takaharu Ishimoto. For those unaware, Takaharu Ishimoto is one of 3 main Kingdom Hearts composers, and the primary composer for a couple important Final Fantasy subseries. Every song you just heard was one of his compositions. As those first 20 questions showed, a lot of his music for these 2 series sounds the same. But why is that the case? I'm going to give you a quick musical analysis to explain why all of his pieces blend together, and afterwards we'll have another round of the quiz with a new twist to take advantage of what we've learned. First things first, you need to understand that one of Ishimoto's strengths as a composer is sampling. His music is best received when he's able to remix existing material. Notably, he has enjoyed wide acclaim for his work on the World Ends With You series, which is based on this hip-hop construction kit style of composition. And let me be clear, there's nothing wrong with sampling. The problem comes when Square Enix assigns Ishimoto to orchestral projects like Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy. Here, Ishimoto is out of his element, since that heavily sampled hip-hop or rock style does not easily translate to orchestral music. He's working at a disadvantage. So with this understanding, let's dive into what exactly makes all of Ishimoto's KH and FF tracks sound so similar. To start, Ishimoto uses the same instrument samples in many different compositions. You can find the same strings, piano, harsh brass, orchestra hits, and shouting choir in a number of his tracks across both series. Sometimes, Ishimoto uses samples in such a similar fashion that I've seen the 2 tracks mistaken for remixes of one another, like with his synthesizer sample in Dream Drop Distance. What makes many of the 2 series songs sound so similar is not just the instrument samples themselves, but the way in which they are bounced. Ishimoto typically bounces his instruments in the same way, often with a bunch of instruments loudly playing on top of each other. What we end up with is a lot of tracks with the same texture. Regardless of their actual content, these pieces are naturally going to sound more similar. Next, let's address Ishimoto's melodies. There are a handful of cases where tracks from the 2 series have the same melody. They don't just sound similar, they are the exact same musical phrase. Now, Ishimoto is not the only Kingdom Hearts composer to reuse melodies from previous games, though I'd argue that Sekito's examples are far more transformative. Regardless, the fact that Ishimoto feels comfortable using the exact same melody lines and compositions for the Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy series speaks volumes. Now, what about the rest of Ishimoto's melodies? Often, when he has to create original melodic material, Ishimoto falls back on short, simple phrases that repeat many times over. You can find this repetitive melodic structure all across Ishimoto's discography. He's particularly fond of making these looping melody lines with only 4 different notes, a habit I've dubbed the Ishimoto 4-note. This style of melodic construction ultimately hurts the individuality of Ishimoto's compositions, which is one of the reasons why his Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy tracks sound so similar. I'll let David Russell explain how this works.
The way Ishimoto composes, with his mostly copy-pasted melodies and highly segmented song structure, I think exposes a weakness in his tracks that unfortunately show up in almost all of his music, which is that if his tiny melodic fragments are not distinct enough, the many repetitions will begin unintentionally making his music sound like all his other tracks, sort of homogenizing them.
Long held-out bass notes are another hallmark of Ishimoto's compositional style, often used in conjunction with his looping melodies. It is common for the part with the harmony, typically the choir, strings, or low brass, to play nothing but whole notes for many measures without much dynamic growth or decay. There's one particularly infamous example of this from Kingdom Hearts 3. In the final boss theme Dark Domination, sampled from the preceding boss theme Critical Crossroad, Ishimoto holds out a C in the choir for an uninterrupted 17 seconds. No changes in volume, no changes in tone, just the note C. This is one of those things that you can never unhear once it's pointed out to you. Just like how Ishimoto's frequent use of short melodic phrases makes his melodies blend together, his frequent use of extended bass notes makes the texture of his harmonies feel indistinct. The several Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy tracks that use these stagnant bass lines have a harder time standing out from one another. The last thing that I'll touch on is the key. Ishimoto favors certain key signatures, namely A, C, and E, typically minor. In fact, 50% of the tracks from round 1 of the quiz had E as the tonic. While there's nothing inherently wrong with using a certain key for multiple songs, when all of the other compositional elements are so similar, it makes each piece stand out even less. Along the same line, Ishimoto favors certain predictable chord progressions. Again, this isn't a problem on its own, but it compounds on the other homogenizing factors. When Ishimoto makes multiple tracks with similar instrumentation and structure, and then gives them an identical central chord progression, it makes them blur together even more. Simply put, the reason why Ishimoto's Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy tracks sound so similar is because they were created with the same compositional formula. His tracks use many of the same instrument samples and are balanced in a similar way. His melodies frequently use the same short looping structure, and his harmonies often feature long held out bass notes. All of these similarities are made even more apparent when the songs are set in the same key with similar chord progressions. In short, Ishimoto crafted both series' songs from the same musical mold. Now, I'm not the only one to make this connection. Even Tetsuya Nomura agrees. In an interview for the World of Trace Orchestra, Nomura recalled that he had to ask Ishimoto for multiple retakes because his KH3 song sounded too Final Fantasy-esque. I think they could have used a few more retakes personally. What Ishimoto delivered is a shame, since there's so much wasted potential. The Kingdom Hearts series has an extensive tradition of musical storytelling. When Ishimoto creates tracks that are interchangeable with his Final Fantasy offerings, he's not only failing to contribute to this rich musical narrative, he's actively detracting from what makes the series unique. Before we get back to the quiz part of the video, I want to make it clear that I'm not criticizing Ishimoto just to be a hater. As I explained in my Dual Hearts video, some of his Kingdom Hearts tracks are indeed special to me. And as I said in the beginning of this analysis, I'm sympathetic to the fact that orchestral music is not Ishimoto's home turf, and it's unfair to expect from him the same exceptional quality as the KH composers who are veterans of the genre. But when Ishimoto creates songs in his Final Fantasy style without respect to the Kingdom Hearts series' musical tradition, when he literally copies and pastes melodies from one series to the other, when he leaves tons of fixable errors in his KH3 arrangements, when he doesn't even make his tracks loop correctly, it really feels like he doesn't care. To quote David Russell, Ishimoto is just not doing his compositional due diligence with this series we all love to bits. And that hurts. It's finally time for round 2 of the quiz. Now that we have an understanding of Ishimoto's compositional trademarks, I'm going to add songs by other composers into the mix. Like last time, you get 1 point for identifying the series and a bonus point for the exact game, but now you'll also have to identify whether or not the track was composed by Takaharu Ishimoto. You get 1 point for correctly saying if he wrote the piece, and if he didn't, you can earn a super bonus point by identifying the real composer. This time I'll also give a brief explanation after each question to highlight some of the compositional tells. Let's get started. This first question was designed to be an easy Ishimoto pick. It's actually a remix of Song 14 from the first part of the quiz, but even if you didn't recognize the melody, those string samples and the repetitive structure should have given it away. This track is also a remix of a song from earlier in the video, but it has the same tells as the first question if you didn't remember. This track is obviously not Ishimoto's style, but I included it to try to trick some of you Kingdom Hearts fans into guessing that it was a Neverland field theme. The instrumentation, texture, and opening few notes are heavily reminiscent of Secret of Neverland from Days, although the track diverges in the second half. It's actually from Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, which has a real all-star compositional team, with this track being the work of Yoko Shimomura. While Ishimoto does sometimes make unnerving dissonant compositions, this particular track was not his work. The biggest giveaway is in the balance. The strings are soft and don't overpower the other instruments. Listen to any of the 4 versions of Shaded Truths and you'll understand what I'm talking about. This is one of Shimomura's pieces from Birth by Sleep. The way the strings grow and contract, and the overall instrumentation, is very unlike Ishimoto. If you listen to the KH3 soundtrack, you'd know that Ishimoto loves to make the choir shout at the listener. When you combine that with the repeating phrases and the instrument balance, or lack thereof, this is definitely an Ishimoto classic. Those orchestra hits at the beginning are very Ishimoto, and the string melody that follows is his usual sample. I tried to throw you off by using a piece where the choir isn't aggressively shouting, but there's still plenty of things pointing towards Ishimoto as the composer. This track was composed by Ishimoto for an upcoming indie game by the director of Fate Grand Order, but the real reason I chose this piece was because of the random cut in the middle. Little mistakes like this are unfortunately not uncommon in Ishimoto's pieces. The quality of the brass instruments and the piano sample should be the biggest clues that this track wasn't Ishimoto's doing. Now, these are some Ishimoto branded orchestra hits and piano samples. This is the original in-game version of Critical Crossroad, and there's a lot going on here. First things first, we have the melody and harmony of Rage Awakened from Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, which is copied one-to-one from the PS2 version. Next, there's no attempt at balance. The instrument sounds like they're shouting over each other to be heard. And to top it off, we have a loop point with an obvious cut. Ishimoto did alter the balance and try to fix the loop in the album version of the song, emphasis on try. The melody of this piece is also based on Rage Awakened, but rather than lifting the original parts from the PS2 arrangement, it transforms it and builds on it in new ways. This track also has live orchestration, which is a rarity for Ishimoto's compositions. This is one of Sekido's Dream Drop Distance compositions. The synthesizers are different from the ones Ishimoto typically uses, and there are a lot of active parts entering and exiting the piece. This track is an Ishimoto original. Compared to the last piece, the synthesizers are flatter and the supporting data effects are just plopped into the song instead of being woven into the accompaniment. This track comes from a browser-based strategy game whose name I will not try to pronounce. Ishimoto's mark is left by a similar synthesizer and a looping 5-note melody. A shouting choir, the same string sample, that one mid-song chord change, this piece has Ishimoto written all over it. This track was arranged and orchestrated by Yuki Kishida for Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind. I included it here because Ishimoto does a lot of guitar-heavy compositions in the Final Fantasy series, so it might catch a few people off guard. This is a classic Ishimoto 4-note. If that wasn't a dead giveaway, the arrangement shares melodic material with one of the examples I used in the analysis section. There's not much to go off with this piece. I think the tone quality is distinct from what Ishimoto usually offers, but there's no obvious tell here. This is monotone. No, I'm not talking about Ishimoto's compositions, I mean that this song is literally from a game called Monotone. I'm contractually obligated to discuss lost mobile games at least once per video, so this 2006 flip phone title should suffice. Ishimoto was indeed the composer, and the game was designed by none other than Tetsuya Nomura. This song was featured in the Square Enix Party 2007 trailer and is the only monotone track that's been preserved. I highly recommend reading into the game if you're interested in lost media, though there's not that much information out there. Hey, I noticed something interesting after I had finished recording this section. Well, I'm pretty certain it's just a coincidence, that one line in the untitled monotone track sounds very similar to Slash and Slash from The World Ends With You. And that's the end of the quiz. I hope you enjoyed learning about Takaharu Ishimoto's compositional patterns, and I encourage you to approach future Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy soundtracks with a more critical and informed ear. Let me know how many points you scored below, and I'll see you back next time for some more analysis of lost Kingdom Hearts games. Toodaloo!